November 11th, 1988. On a quiet street in Sacramento, California, a body has been discovered.
The reason for cutting off her head, hands, and feet were if by some chance someone did find the body, they wouldn't know who it was.
A terrible crime is about to be unearthed, and with it, the cold, dark secrets of a serial killer no one would ever suspect.
People never took this case seriously in terms of what it was, which was mass murder.
Along with police, there are those who chronicle the investigation up close, on film, on paper, and on tape. They are the public's first witness. Through their lens, they capture our darkest chapters of crime.
What's up, Panic Fam? I'm Hannah, and if it's 2 a.m., the lights are off and the popcorn has gone cold, you know, it's Panic TV time. Welcome. If you survived this, and this, congratulations, all right? Congratulations, but your luck runs out here.
"385 miles north of Los Angeles, Sacramento County sits in the heart of the expansive Central Valley. Sacramento is its largest city and also serves as state capital.
Sacramento in the mid-'80s was still considered by most to be a small town. It was growing, but it still had a very small town feel.
Neighborhoods were expanding, and there was a lot of building going on, and there were people coming and going. But it's always been a growing city, you know, and a very likable town, likable place to be in.
We had our issues, just like most of growing cities, you know, going around town. During that time period in the early 80s or mid-'80s, we noticed a big spike in our homicide rate.
By the late 80s, Sacramento residents are also noticing an increase in the number of homeless that roam the downtown streets.
Northern California in general is a good destination for homeless people. California has a very generous benefits program for homeless people, and the weather's mild. The people are tolerant.
Some residents are more than tolerant. They want to help. In 1988, �10𝙀😍 𝐭𝐸 is a street counselor with an outreach program known as the Volunteers of America.
My job in the 80s was to locate people who were not getting services on the street and who were living homeless and mentally ill, unable to actually do it themselves.
One case in particular has attracted Judy's attention. A 51-year-old schizophrenic who talks to voices only he can hear. His name is Alberto Gonzalez Montoya, known affectionately as Bert. Charmed by Bert's gentle, childlike nature, Judy takes it upon herself to find him a decent place to live. Judy finds that place just blocks from the state capitol, a downtown boarding house often used by social workers to accommodate hard-to-manage clients. The address? 1426 F Street. The neighborhood has seen better days, but the blue and white Victorian with its landscaped yard and garden is a pleasant surprise. So is its white-haired landlady, Dorothea Puente.
She said that she was in her 70s and that she had actually been a nurse in the Battle of Bataan during World War II. And I was very impressed with that.
Known for donating money and clothes to charity and for hiring parolees from the local halfway house to do yard work, Dorothea Puente also has a grandmotherly concern for her tenants.
I think what made the boarding house that Puente had very popular with social workers and social agencies is the fact that she opened her arms to all. These are individuals with alcoholic problems, maybe drug problems, some mental problems.
Most of Dorothea's clientele are elderly with a litany of health problems. James Gallup is a 62-year-old down-and-outer with a brain tumor. Dorothy Miller is a 64-year-old alcoholic. Betty Palmer and Leona Carpenter are both in their late 70s, unable to fend for themselves.
All of Dorothea's boarders were receiving various kinds of benefits, and she knew how to work the system. So if there was any way that they could get more, she would get more for them.
Despite Dorothea Puente's care and kindness, Gallup, Miller, Palmer, and Carpenter have already moved out by the time Bert Montoya moves in on February 3rd, 1988. Another boarder, 62-year-old Vera Faye Martin, stays only 2 days before leaving without a word.
That's not uncommon with people that live in these boarding houses. They could just get up one day and walk away, or move to another facility, or whatever.
Bert and his fellow boarders reside on the main floor of the house, each in their own bedroom. 64-year-old retired cook John Sharp doesn't drink, but his neighbor, 55-year-old Ben Fink, has made a life of it.
Benjamin Fink had a long history of checking into the ER with very high alcohol levels. After he got his check, he would go on binges and be a real heavy drinker.
After one of those binges in April 1988, Fink also disappears. His social worker is not surprised. Once again, another transient tenant has moved on. Bert Montoya, however, seems to blossom under Dorothea Puente's loving care.
We came back and he had a very nice haircut. He was very clean, and he had some very nice clothes. It was amazing, the transformation. And we were just delighted that he was getting the kind of help that he really needed.
Over the summer of 1988, Bert continues to thrive, and counselor Judy Moyes is confident that everything is going to be all right. In November of 1988, however, Sacramento police get a call from a woman who wants to file a missing persons report. The woman is Judy Moyes. The missing person is Bert Montoya. November 7th, 1988. In Sacramento, California, police officer Richard Ewing meets with street counselor Judy Moyes. Judy tells the officer that one of her clients, 51-year-old schizophrenic Bert Montoya, has been missing for several weeks, and that his disappearance from the boarding house where he lives just doesn't add up.
Alberto had been at Dorothea Puente's, I think, about 6 months. And one of the staff people said, "Hey, guess what happened?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Alberto went with the room and board people down to Mexico to visit Dorothea's doctor brother."
Judy tells Officer Ewing that when she called Dorothea Puente, the elderly landlady assured her that Bert would return in a few days. When he still hasn't returned after several weeks, Judy informs Dorothea that she is ready to bring in the police. A few days later, the social worker receives a phone call at work.
I answered the phone, and this man said, "Hello, this is Don Anthony. I mean Michelle Obregon. And I have Alberto with me. He's my nephew, and he is with me in Utah. We're in Shreveport, Utah."
When Judy calls Dorothea, the elderly woman assures her the story is true.
And she said, "Well, you know what? Sunday while I was at Mass, a relative of his came by and just packed him up and took him, left a note for me." And I said, yeah, well, listen, I'm calling the police, because the story had a lot of holes in it, and she was obviously covering.
Judy urges Officer Ewing to go to the boarding house at 1426 F Street to investigate.
I told him that there was a person that was living in the home named John Sharp, and that he was a person that he could get the correct information from, John didn't have a mental illness. He wasn't an alcoholic like the other residents. And I felt that he would give him the true version of whatever did happen. So Officer Ewing went over to Dorothea's home shortly after that.
Dorothea Puente is as gracious as ever, showing the officer around and answering his questions. He also talks to John Sharp, who confirms that 𝙀𝙁 Montoya left with a relative the previous morning. Satisfied that Dorothea is telling the truth, Officer Ewing is about to leave when he is approached by John Sharp.
One of the tenants passed him a note, and on the note, it asked the officer to meet him at another location because he had something to tell the officer. So the officer subsequently met that particular tenant away from everybody else, and that tenant told him that Dorothea had asked the tenants to lie and to say that 𝙀𝙁 had left with relatives.
Sharp also shares his suspicions of strange goings-on at the boarding house. The sound of something being dragged down the stairs the night Ben Fink moved out, and a foul smell coming from a room upstairs.
He told the officer that there were suspicious holes dug in the yard and that he thought people were being buried in the yard. He had a suspicion of that.
Officer Ewing contacts Detective Sergeant John Cabrera of Missing Persons and Homicide.
Then you start doing all the checks that you can, you know, driver's license, all of the primary checks. Well, the first thing I found is that she was on federal parole for forgery of Social Security checks, and also for putting stupefying drugs in her victims' drinks.
Detective Cabrera discovers that on at least 4 occasions during 1981 and 1982, Dorothea Puente posed as a nurse, then drugged her elderly patients in order to steal jewelry, blank checks, and credit cards. When they arrested her in late April 1982, police found a ticket to Mexico in her purse. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, Dorothea was released in 1985 on good behavior. She moved back to the house on F Street, where she lived before her conviction.
Things started to become a little bit more clear that this could be, you know, right in line with the person missing. He was receiving Social Security money. Nobody knew his whereabouts.
Cabrera discovers something else. According to her file, Dorothea Puente is only 59 years old.
She lied to Judy Moyes and told her she was in her 70s. And she had no teeth, so without her teeth and with her silver hair, she could look much older than she was.
Detective Cabrera meets with Judy Moyes to share what he knows about Dorothea Puente.
So then Detective Cabrera said, so what is it you want us to do? I said, I want you to go to the house. He said, do you want us to bring shovels? I said, sure.
Friday, November 11th, 1988. Homicide detectives John Cabrera and Terry Brown and parole agent James Wilson arrive at 1426 F Street to question Dorothea Puente.
I explained to her why we were there because of the report with 𝙀𝙁 Montoya. And she didn't seem mad or she didn't seem upset about anything. She just said, oh yeah, you know, and she mentioned Judy Moyes and that 𝙀𝙁 had gone with relatives. And Dorothea was very believable in anything she said. She would look straight at you, tell you exactly, you know, what she was thinking or what she had to say. And she didn't even flinch a moment when I asked her to search her house. I checked everything. I looked under beds. I tapped the walls, you know, but I had to keep in mind that 𝙀𝙁 was a rather big person, so if he was going to be stuffed somewhere, it would be pretty obvious.
Although he sees no sign of 𝙀𝙁 Montoya, he does find 2 prescription bottles in Dorothea's bedroom. One is an uncapped plastic vial filled to overflowing with blue capsules. The other is an empty container he finds on the floor.
And I looked at it, and it had the name of Dorothy Miller. And so I took that pill vial, I went back out into the living room where Dorothea was sitting with the other officers. And I said, "Who's Dorothea Miller?" And I remember her telling me Dorothea Miller was a relative of hers. You know, and she had come and visited with her and probably left that behind.
Ugh, I swear my neighbors think I'm probably getting murdered right now.
With a preliminary search of the house complete, Detective Cabrera asks Puente if they can do some digging in her yard.
I remember her kind of asking, you know, why I wanted to dig in the yard. And I told her, well, you know, I had some information that maybe somebody was buried there. She didn't even flinch. She said, oh yeah, you know, please, feel free. She even assisted us by getting us another shovel.
For John Cabrera, getting Dorothea's permission is vital to this stage of the investigation.
And we didn't need a search warrant at that particular time. We started digging into 3 particular areas in this little garden area. And it was about maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes later, we started pulling up articles out of one of the holes that looked to be like a material. And then we had this pile of leather-looking small discs that accompanied the find of this material.
As the officers dig further, they hit a tree root they cannot dislodge with their shovels.
I climbed into the hole, and I kept pulling on it and pulling on it. And then eventually it broke loose. And when I'm sitting in the back of this hole and I'm looking down at this object in my hand, it's not a tree root. It was a human bone, is what it appeared to me. And that was the beginning.
November 11th, 1988. In Sacramento, California, human remains have been found buried in a backyard. The address is 1426 F Street, a quaint Victorian boarding house that serves as a sanctuary for society's lost souls. The grim discovery is the result of a search for one of those souls, a gentle 51-year-old schizophrenic named Alberto Bert Montoya, missing since August. Now, homicide detective John Cabrera escorts landlady Dorothea Puente to the freshly dug hole in her once immaculate backyard.
We brought her down, walked her over to the hole and said, take a look there. You know, and she gave it one of these, you know, she gasped and, oh my gosh, and she became real nervous and kind of upset, and she didn't know what to think and didn't know anything about this, and she was very believable.
What Dorothea has been shown is the bone from a human leg, a foot encased in a shoe, and 2 types of material, one light and soft, the other tough and coarse.
We determined that the cloth material appeared to look like what might have been a dress or some type of blouse item.
After being called to the scene, Deputy Coroner Laura Santos decides to wait until a proper forensic team can be assembled before investigating further.
We should have a crime scene set up. Someone should guard the property tonight until tomorrow, and everybody can regroup, and that's what was done, basically.
Along with that, I requested CSI so that that particular CSI officer could come out and now start photographing the scene and anything and everything that we deem to be evidentiary as far as the property.
By the following morning, Saturday, November 12th, F Street residents are gathering to watch. A canopy protects the yard from rain as a crowd of media and neighborhood onlookers gathers in the street.
The area was so congested with traffic and news reporters and the big satellite trucks that I remember I drove around in circles trying to find a way in.
In the garden, forensic archaeologists supervise the careful recovery of the delicate remains.
All of the dirt that was taken out was set aside to be screened for evidence.
The corpse is that of an elderly female, definitely not the body of Bert Montoya. Police decide to do more digging.
Got a call on that Saturday morning from the Chronicle in San Francisco. They had heard about the story, and one of their contacts had, I believe, spoken with somebody in the police department and had gotten the information that they were going to start a pretty major search, and there was potential for more bodies.
If you look at this property, there really wasn't a whole lot of yard there, but it was enough that if you had to do it by shovel, it would take you probably a considerable amount of days. So we requested a backhoe to come in and to assist us in digging the entire yard.
As the digging begins, Dorothea Puente asks to speak with Detective John Cabrera.
She said, "Am I under arrest?" Well, at that particular time, she wasn't. And so, I said, "Well, no, you're not under arrest, and why?" And she said, "All this is making me nervous, and I would like to go have a cup of coffee with one of my relatives just around the corner at the hotel."
Because she has been so helpful and cooperative, police do not consider her a flight risk. After getting the okay, Cabrera escorts Dorothea through the crowd and walks her to the hotel.
Somewhere I've got a picture of her standing there talking to Cabrera just as she was getting ready to walk away. Just a matronly little old lady. That's all she was. I mean, she didn't look like she could hurt a fly.
And I mean, she was just nice about everything. But I still had that feeling in the back of my head, there's just something here. She's just too nice.
Not long after his return to the yard, Detective Cabrera realizes how right his intuition is.
And it was about 21 minutes later that I was digging in this area that I struck something. And I dug down deeper and I pulled, and when I did, all of a sudden, there came a lake. And at that point, I knew there was definitely something had gone on here. I stopped. I immediately yelled for my commander. I remember him asking me, "Where's Dorothea?" I said, "She's over at the hotel having coffee." He ran off to get her. A few minutes later, he comes back. He says, "She's gone." And I remember that sinking feeling, that the reason she had summoned me is because I was probably maybe 2 feet away from discovering that body, and she wasn't about to be there when I pulled it up.
No one expected Dorothea to run, and it created quite the media storm at the time because no one knew where she'd gone. I mean, she just disappeared.
The search for Dorothea Puente is underway by the time police find the third body. Like the first two, it is carefully exhumed using garden trowels and brushes.
This body was wrapped in numerous layers of wrapping quilts, bedspreads, plastic, and some of it was stitched together. And so we couldn't see anything at that point, and we didn't want to disturb any of the evidence. 2 forensic pathologists from my office came over to the site to see what the body looked like in position. And they made their own notes and things. And then the whole board with the body and all the evidence, all the wrappings, was transported to the coroner's office in a van.
Excavation of the yard continues as police look for anyone who can shed light on what has been going on at 1426 F Street. Dorothea's next-door neighbor recalls a foul stench in May that was so bad he couldn't use his air conditioner.
When she was contacted, she just simply told him that she just put some fertilizer out in her yard, and that probably is the origin of the smell.
The neighbor also shows police a discovery he made in his own backyard that morning.
He went out in the morning in the backyard and he found 24 human teeth, all of them filled with silver and gold fillings. Obviously, she knew that the heat was on.
Social workers provide lists of clients placed at the boarding house over the previous 18 months, including John Sharp and Ben Fink. Detective Cabrera recognizes another name, Dorothy Miller, the woman that Dorothea told him was a relative. On Sunday, November 13th, there is still no sign of the missing landlady, and the story is front-page news. In the yard, investigators uncover 2 more bodies, also wrapped in cloth and plastic.
It was like something was spoiled. But I have photographs of people holding their hands up to their mouths, you know, just covering their nose so they don't smell it. Some were wearing like those little face masks. So yeah, it's definitely the smell was in the air.
It was obvious almost right from the beginning that some of them had been buried much longer than others. Some appeared to have only been buried maybe a few weeks to a couple of months. Some appeared to have been buried for a year or 2. The rates of decomposition were greatly different.
Police are also able to determine that Dorothea Puente did not dig the holes herself.
We would discover the parolees from the halfway house came and dug the holes, but they didn't have any idea what was really going to be put in the holes. She paid them cash, they went about their way. There was nothing unusual as far as the holes being dug.
Detectives also discover that one of the ex-convicts is Don Anthony, the man who phoned 𝙀𝙀 𝐒𝐿𝐦𝐞 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐢𝐻𝐵 Montoya's relative. More evidence that links Dorothea Puente to 𝙀𝙀 Montoya's disappearance. On Monday, November 14th, police pull down a shed in the middle of the backyard and find a shallow grave underneath. Later that day, they uncover another body in the front yard.
The picture that stands out the most in my mind is a photograph that I took of a city worker digging in the front yard, and he was digging right next to a statue of the Virgin Mary. I thought it was really ironic that this person was buried right underneath this statue.
And what was different about this particular body is that the remains had no head, no hands, and no feet. The reason for cutting off her head, hands, and feet were if by some chance someone did find the body, they wouldn't know who it was.
On Tuesday, November 15th, police get a search warrant to go back inside the boarding house.
We were able to gather up somewhere probably over 300 items of evidence from the outside and the interior of the boarding house. I found a book right on the table, and the book was Drugs and Their Effects. So basically, I just looked at it as this was Dorothea's cookbook. And then along on the kitchen table, I found a driver's license. And the driver's license had Dorothea's picture on it, but not Dorothea's name. So she'd already gone to the point where she was changing driver's license belonging to her victims and putting her picture on it.
In a guest room, Detective Cabrera experiences the odor that Tenant John Sharp first noticed in May.
Apparently, this is the room she kept her victims in. And they might have been there up to a week, maybe 2 weeks. And the body fluids would penetrate the carpet and then down into the floor. And this is what created a very foul smell. And when we rolled the carpet back, it was very, very bad. I mean, it was just amazing that these things were just laid out in the open. Because, you know, there was no question. I believe she never thought she was going to be found out.
Wednesday, November 16th, 1988. A 2-story boarding house in Sacramento, California has become front-page news as police conduct a nationwide hunt for its landlady, Dorothea Puente.
Media from all over the world started showing up. We had TV crews from Germany and Japan, England.
The discovery of 7 bodies just blocks from Sacramento's Capitol building has also captured the imagination of local residents.
At one point, the full city block in front of her house there on F Street was shoulder to shoulder with people from sidewalk to sidewalk. Kids in their parochial school uniforms, Sacramento lobbyists on their luncheon breaks. And everybody standing out there, they began to decorate their houses with Nightmare on F Street posters. It was a circus.
At the Sacramento coroner's office, an autopsy begins on the first victim found buried in the boarding house yard. One of the first things identified is the leather-like material dug up by John Cabrera and the other detectives.
They said, you know what that stuff was? I said, no. They said, it was just the flesh. It'd come off the, it was petrifying. It was come off the body. Yeah, it made me kind of cringe for a moment.
The usual means of identification of victims in a case like this is number 1, fingerprints, number 2, dental records. But in this case, most of the bodies were too decomposed to do fingerprints. And all but one of the victims did not have any teeth. We actually received an offer of help from the Social Security Department, and one of their agents from San Francisco offered to give us a list of everyone who had received Social Security benefits at that address for the past 3 or 4 years.
The list doesn't specify who actually received most of the money sent to the F Street address, but it is becoming clear to police that it was Dorothea Puente.
She just made it a point when their checks came at the end of each month, she went out and got the mail. And then she would bring the money in, and then she told her tenants that she would take care of their money.
Some tenants on the list have not been living at the boarding house for more than a year, including Vera Faye Martin, Dorothy Miller, James Gallup, and Leona Carpenter. Betty Palmer has not been seen for more than 2 years, yet their benefit checks still come to the F Street address because no one has reported them missing.
Dorothea Puente chose her victims carefully. She chose people to live there who didn't have a lot of contact with their families or didn't have any family at all, and they were isolated. And so most of them had no one that was looking for them.
There is one family that is looking for a lost relative. Detective John Cabrera receives a phone call inquiring about 77-year-old Everson Gilmuth. He has not been in contact with his family since late 1985, after leaving for California to get married. His intended bride, Dorothea Puente.
What makes this most interesting is the fact that during this period from 1986 to 1988, she was still in contact with his family through letters, always telling them about how she and Everson was doing things and traveling and all of this. In fact, it wasn't until this case had hit the news media that the family made contact with me wanting to know how their father was. I didn't quite know what they were referring to or what they were talking about.
Detective Cabrera is also contacted by William Clausen about another suspicious death at the F Street boarding house more than 6 years earlier. The victim is his mother, Ruth Monroe. Detective Cabrera learns that in 1982, Ruth Monroe was a 61-year-old grandmother, dreading the thought of living alone after her husband is hospitalized with terminal cancer. A friend offered the perfect solution. Since she and Ruth are partners in a catering business already, why not share a house as well? The name of Ruth's partner? Dorothea Puente. The address, 1426 F Street.
My brother and I moved her in on Easter Sunday. And I stopped by every day after work. I'd go by and see her. About 2 weeks went by, and then I noticed my mom had a drink in her hand, and she didn't drink. So I asked her what it was, and she said that Dorothea had fixed her a drink to calm her down.
Bill Clausen tells Detective Cabrera that on the evening of April 27th, 1982, he visited his mother again. But this time, Ruth was in bed, unable to move or speak.
So I kind of sat on the edge of the bed, put my hand on her, kind of pulled her down a little bit and told her that she'd be okay, that Dorothea was taking care of her, everything was okay. And then I left.
The next morning, I got a phone call that she was dead. Well, the autopsy report came back as undetermined overdose, classified as a suicide.
And so the coroner showed up and investigated and found that Ruth allegedly had died from this overdose of a mixture of, drugs. And so there wasn't any reason to suspect that any foul play had taken place, because what Dorothea had told the authorities is that Ruth Monroe, at that particular time, was a very depressed person. Contrary to later on we would find from her family that wasn't so. She was upbeat, she was happy, and then the next minute she's dead, and then here's Dorothea telling authorities, she was a very depressed person.
Cabrera realizes that at the time of Ruth's death in April 1982, Dorothea was about to go to prison for drugging elderly patients. She needed to escape, and Ruth Monroe was a ready source of cash that likely paid for the ticket to Mexico found on Puente at the time of her arrest.
And so given that circumstances, we added Ruth's death now as a homicide.
If you could slap one character for their dumb decisions, who would it be? Huh? Go on. Vent in the comments. I can't wait to read.
With Dorothea still on the run, police are tracking their suspect and following leads that have taken them as far away as Las Vegas. Then, on Wednesday evening, November 16th, the Los Angeles Police Department receives a call from the local bureau of the network news. A retired handyman has contacted the network, claiming that he just spent the afternoon in a bar with the woman being sought by Sacramento police.
During this time that they were together, the subject of conversation was him receiving Social Security benefits. And so he called the authorities, and they went out to where he knew she was staying.
At 10:20 p.m., Los Angeles police approach a room at a local motel. A woman answers the door.
And at first, she gave them a different name when they asked who she was. But they didn't buy into that, and they wanted to know, see some ID or something along that line. And it was at that time she just said, okay, my name is Dorothea Puente. She wasn't very talkative, but she was very open about, her cashing the victims' checks. And I remember her apologizing, but she was very adamant about cashing the checks, not killing anybody.
Somebody had called me and told me that they were bringing her in. So I went out to Executive Airport, and that's where they brought her in. They got her off the plane. She's handcuffed, and just a little old grandma-looking type. Wouldn't think she could do anything.
There is, however, enough circumstantial evidence to charge Dorothea Puente for the murder of 𝙁 Montoya.
I don't think anybody ever lost any sleep over Dorothea Puente being on the lam. People never took this case seriously in terms of what it was, which was mass murder.
Meanwhile, the coroner's office works in shifts to identify the 7 victims and establish how they died. The fourth body is an adult male with 4 tattoos, markings that identify 55-year-old Ben Fink. Pathologists are able to lift fingerprints off only 2 of the bodies, 1 female and 1 male. Military records confirm that the female victim is Dorothy Miller. The male victim is 𝙁 Montoya. For Judy Moyes, her worst fears are confirmed.
I think that if Dorothea Puente had a motive for killing Alberto, it was that he knew too much and that he knew too many people that he could report that this was done.
Soon, the names of the remaining victims are added to the list. James Gallup, Leona Carpenter, Vera Faye Martin, and Betty Palmer. The 7 bodies have been identified, but cause of death cannot be confirmed. Still, there is a pattern.
I had noticed that all the bodies that we were bringing up were dressed in a particular way. They were wrapped with a lot of duct tape, plastic, sheets. I put out a bulletin to all agencies asking if they'd had any bodies that were found in this similar manner. And shortly after I had put it out, Sutter County homicide detectives got a hold of me and said, yeah, you know, in 1986 we had a body found.
The body is identified as 77-year-old Everson Gilmuth, the man who came to California to marry Dorothea Puente. On June 19, 1990, Dorothea Puente is ordered to stand trial on 9 counts of murder that include the deaths of Ruth Monroe and Everson Gilmuth. The trial that follows will be almost as shocking as the crimes themselves. February 9th, 1993. Almost 5 years after the first human bone was uncovered in the garden in Sacramento, the murder trial of Dorothea Puente finally gets underway. Delays have plagued the case for more than 2 years, including a change of venue hearing that moves the trial to Monterey County because of the amount of publicity in Sacramento. The prosecution produces testimony from 156 witnesses and more than 3,000 exhibits. No one testifies to seeing Dorothea Puente actually kill or bury anyone. And in all the deaths, except Ruth Monroe's, there is no clear cause.
Just because the coroner cannot determine the cause of death doesn't mean we can't classify a death as a homicide. And obviously, since these people were buried, many of them were bound, wrapped, you know, it was pretty obvious they didn't dig holes and jump in themselves. There was a reason they were in these graves, and someone else had to be involved.
The defense doesn't deny that Dorothea Puente stole her tenants' benefits and even buried them in her garden. But despite the presence of the drug Dalmane in all the buried bodies, the defense argues that it was not the cause of death.
That became really critical during the trial because the defense was trying to portray that these people died of natural causes. And indeed, they had every illness you could name. So if you can't prove cause of death, can you prove murder? Their point of view was that they just simply died, and then she buried them and continued to collect their checks.
On July 15th, the jury goes into deliberation without hearing testimony from the accused.
Dorothea Puente did not take the stand. John O'Mara was a very good, very tenacious prosecutor, and Dorothea Puente would be no match for him on the stand.
On August 26, 1993, after 43 days, the longest trial deliberation in California history, the jury announces that they have a verdict.
Out of 9 counts of murder, she was convicted on 3 of them. 4 of those counts, which were 4 bodies and victims out of her yard, would go 11-1. That is 11 guilty, 1 not guilty. 2 of the cases would evenly split.
The jury finds Dorothea Puente guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of Ben Fink and Dorothy Miller, and of second-degree murder in the death of Leona Carpenter. The judge declares a mistrial on the other 6 counts, including those related to Ruth Monroe and Bert Montoya. On October 13th, 1993, Dorothea Puente is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
She was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole, and then an additional 25 to life on those 3 counts.
In the wake of the Puente case, regulations regarding Social Security are tightened, and a national database is set up on all applicants to keep better track of their whereabouts. For many of those involved in the case, life after Dorothea Puente is never the same.
Personally, I wasn't able to work anymore as a street counselor. I did stay for another 6 months, but I no longer had that type of enthusiasm for it.
Even now, there's times coming home from work, I think of going to see Mom. And then I remember, no, she's not there.
Today, Dorothea Puente is still in prison and will remain there for the rest of her life.
When you think of a mass murder, you don't think of a grandmotherly type of lady. She appeared more like somebody that would be baking cookies for the neighborhood children.
I'm most grateful for Alberto because if it weren't for him, she wouldn't have been caught. I can remember his smile, his warmth, and his caring.
If the police hadn't discovered bodies, she would have continued to kill and cash checks. I think that she definitely got what she deserved.
And there are people still today that I run into that still shake their head in disbelief and want to just tell me, you know, I don't know, did she really do that? And of course my answer was yes. She did every one of them.
Hopefully she won't live much longer. And then she'll meet her maker. Her punishment is still coming.
Be honest. Did you watch the last scene through your fingers? Comment yes or no.